The gossip started before Clara May even stepped off the train. Did you hear? Samuel's bride-to-be is blind as a bat, whispered Mrs. Henderson to anyone who would listen at the general store. Poor girl probably doesn't even know what she's walking into. But Clara May knew exactly what she was walking into. She had heard every cruel word, every pitying sigh, every hushed conversation that people thought she couldn't detect. What they didn't understand was that losing her sight had sharpened everything else. She could hear the uncertainty in Samuel's letters, smell the doubt that clung to this dusty frontier town like smoke from a dying fire, and feel the weight of their stares even through the train window. Samuel Crawford stood on the platform, his weathered hands fidgeting with the brim of his brown hat. At 32, he had built a life of quiet solitude on his ranch outside Texas. The arrangement had been practical. His sister Martha had written to Clara's family back in Missouri, explaining that Samuel needed a wife to help with the growing demands of ranch life. Clara needed a fresh start, somewhere far from the accident that had stolen her sight and the prying eyes that followed her everywhere. You must be Samuel, Clara said softly as she stepped carefully down from the train, one hand trailing along the wooden railing. Her voice carried a gentle strength that surprised him. Yes, ma'am, he replied, removing his hat entirely. And you're Clara May. She turned toward the sound of his voice, and Samuel found himself looking into eyes the color of morning sky. They didn't focus on him directly, but something in her expression, calm, patient, even kind, made his chest tighten in an unexpected way. I hope the journey wasn't too difficult, he said, offering his arm. Clara's fingers found his elbow with practiced ease. Not at all, though I confess, I'm curious about this place you call home. As they walked through town toward Samuel's wagon, Clara painted a picture of Meadowbrook in her mind through sounds and scents. The rhythmic hammering from the blacksmith's shop, the sweet aroma of fresh bread drifting from the bakery, the creak of wooden signs swaying in the wind, and underneath it all, the whispered conversations that followed in their wake. Is she really going to manage out at the Crawford place? How is she supposed to cook or clean or tend to children? Samuel must be desperate to settle for damaged goods. Clara's grip on Samuel's arm tightened slightly, but her expression remained serene. Samuel, however, felt heat rise in his chest at the cruel words. He had expected some talk, but the casual cruelty in their voices made him want to turn around and give them all a piece of his mind. Don't mind them, Clara said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. People fear what they don't understand. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour, and Samuel found himself describing the landscape without being asked. The way the prairie grass rolled like ocean waves in the wind, how the cottonwoods lined the creek that ran through his property, the red barn where he kept his horses, and the sturdy log cabin he had built with his own hands. It sounds peaceful, Clara said, her face turned toward the warmth of the afternoon sun. It is, Samuel agreed, sometimes too peaceful. Gets lonely out here. Clara nodded, understanding loneliness in ways that went deeper than isolation. She had been alone in crowds, surrounded by people who saw only her blindness instead of her heart. The first weeks of their marriage were awkward and polite. They moved around each other like careful dancers, neither wanting to step on the other's toes. Samuel had prepared a separate bedroom for Clara, assuming she would want privacy. Clara had accepted this arrangement without comment, though something in her heart had hoped for more warmth. But gradually, small moments began to build bridges between them. Samuel discovered that Clara could navigate the kitchen better than he could, her hands finding ingredients and utensils with surprising efficiency. She learned the layout of their home within days, counting steps and memorizing the placement of furniture. More importantly, she began to fill the cabin with sounds Samuel hadn't realized he had been hungry for, humming as she worked. The gentle rustle of her dress as she moved through rooms, the soft questions she asked about his day. Tell me about the horses, she said one evening as they sat on the front porch after dinner. Samuel leaned back in his chair, surprised by how easy it had become to talk to her. Well, there's Thunder, he's my stallion, black as midnight with a white star on his forehead, proud as can be, but gentle when he trusts you. Then there's Buttercup, she's a mare with a coat like honey, sweet-tempered but stubborn as a mule when she doesn't want to do something. Clara laughed, a sound that seemed to light up the twilight air. They sound wonderful. Would it be possible for me to meet them? The next morning, Samuel led Clara carefully to the barn. He watched nervously as she extended her hand toward Thunder, letting the horse catch her scent before making contact. But his worry was unnecessary. Thunder nickered softly and pressed his great head against Clara's palm, as if he understood that this human needed gentleness. He's magnificent, Clara whispered, her hands exploring the horse's neck and mane with reverent care. Samuel felt something shift in his chest as he watched her. There was no fear in Clara, no hesitation, just a deep appreciation for the life around her, even though she couldn't see it in the traditional way. As autumn painted the Texas landscape in shades, Clara could only imagine. Their relationship deepened. Samuel began describing sunsets to her in detail, the way golden light spread across the prairie like honey on warm bread. Clara in turn helped Samuel notice things he had overlooked, the different sounds birds made at various times of day, the way the air smelled before rain, the subtle changes in wind direction that meant weather was coming. One evening, as Clara prepared supper, she heard the thunder of approaching horses, multiple riders, moving fast. Samuel appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. "Stay inside," he said quietly. "We've got company." Clara recognized the tone trouble was coming. Through the window, she could hear raised voices. A group of men from town had ridden out, led by Marcus Webb, a man who had been vocal about his disapproval of Samuel's choice in a wife. Crawford. Webb's voice carried across the yard. "We need to talk." Samuel stepped onto the porch, his hand resting on the rifle he kept by the door. "What's this about, Marcus?" "It's about that woman you married," Webb called back. "She's not suitable for frontier life. What happens when you need her to help with emergencies? What if raiders come through, or there's a fire? She'll be nothing but a burden." Clara felt her heart sink. She had hoped that proving herself capable around the house and with the animals would be enough, but clearly, some people would never see past her blindness. "My wife is none of your concern," Samuel replied, his voice steady but cold. "She is when it affects the whole community," Webb pressed. "What if you have children? How's a blind woman going to protect them?" "You're being selfish, Samuel. Putting your own loneliness ahead of common sense." Clara closed her eyes, feeling the familiar ache of being discussed as if she weren't there, as if her blindness made her less than human. She had faced this her whole life, but it still hurt. Then she heard Samuel's boots on the porch boards, his steps firm and decisive. "Let me tell you about my wife," Samuel said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "She can cook better than any woman in Meadowbrook. She knows when a storm is coming hours before it hit. She can calm a spooked horse with just her voice. She runs this household better than I ever did alone, and she has more courage in her little finger than the lot of you combined." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "But they weren't tears of sadness," Samuel continued, his voice growing stronger. "Clara May sees things the rest of us miss. She hears things we ignore. She understands things we're too blind to notice. If you can't respect my wife, then you can stay off my property." There was a long silence. Then the sound of horses turning and riding away. Samuel came back inside to find Clara standing in the middle of the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. "Clara May, what's wrong? Did they frighten you?" She shook her head, a smile breaking through her tears. "No one has ever stood up for me like that." Samuel crossed the room slowly, stopping just in front of her. "They should have. Anyone who really saw you would. And you see me?" she asked softly. "I see you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I see your kindness, your strength, your beautiful heart. I see how you make this house feel like a home. I see how the horses trust you, how the very air seems lighter when you're near. I see you, Clara May, all of you." She reached up, her hands finding his face, tracing the lines around his eyes, the curve of his jaw, the lips that had just defended her honor. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied, the words coming easier than he had expected. "I think I have since the day you stepped off that train when." Their first child arrived the following spring, a healthy baby girl. With her mother's gentle spirit and her father's strong hands, the town gossips had new things to discuss. How Clara May had navigated her pregnancy with grace, how she somehow knew exactly what her crying baby needed, how Samuel looked at his family like they were the most precious things in the world. By the time their twin boys were born 2 years later, the whispers had changed entirely. Clara May Crawford wasn't the blind woman who couldn't manage ranch life. She was the woman who could predict weather better than the almanac, who raised the most well-behaved children in 3 counties, who helped other mothers when their babies were sick, who could tell which cow was having birthing troubles just by the sound of its lowing. The woman who had walked into Samuel Crawford's life and shown him that sometimes the most beautiful things can only be seen with the heart. On quiet evenings, Samuel would sit on their porch with Clara May beside him, their children playing in the yard, and describe the sunset painting the sky in brilliant colors. Clara would listen with a smile, her hand in his, painting her own picture made of love and contentment and the knowledge that she was truly seen. The blind bride they had mocked had indeed walked into Samuel's life. But she hadn't just left with his heart, she had given him her own in return, and together they had built something beautiful that no amount of sight could have shown them alone.